Tommy, Jaggi of Fansided, here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher, and we come to you with almost no NFL news, Marcus. Last time we were on this show, we got to talk about a Myles Garrett trade and just some of the buzz was happening around the NFL, stuff that normally doesn't happen this time of year. Right now, it is dead quiet, as you would expect, because we are entering mid-June here, and it's pretty quiet around the NFL, but we're going to talk about NFL trends. Are you buying or selling some of the latest NFL trends? And so we're going to make it a fun show regardless.
Yeah, and I want to start, Tommy, with the tight end craze that's happening in the NFL. And it started in free agency this year. You started to see more of these, let's call them like non-superstar tight ends, just to be very kind, starting to get paid a lot of money. I think a perfect example was Charlie Kohler of the Baltimore Ravens signed a big contract with the Chargers, and you're starting to see more and more teams lean into having 2, 3, or even 4 tight end sets. So I've got my theory behind why it's happening, but I'd love to hear yours. Why do you think we're seeing an uptick in tight ends in their value across the league?
Yeah, I think there has to be more versatile for one thing. You talk about a H-back, an inline tight end, an F tight end. What's so interesting, Marcus, is the NFL absolutely goes in waves. And I think that we're seeing that yet again. You go back to like the 90s, early 2000s. It was all about smash mouth football. The running game, obviously, you wanted the big-bodied inline tight ends. We got away from that for a while, and then it was the air raid passing game, and it's everybody doing 11 personnel and trying to push the ball down the field. Well, in recent years, there hasn't been much of that. And with the quick passing game and the run game coming back, I think that's a big reason why we're seeing this resurgence at the tight end position.
I think that's very, very possible. And honestly, that's probably the best reasoning. I think because these tight ends can do so much, um, they're really valuable to have as like that fourth and fifth weapon in your passing game. I also think the NFL just likes to copy whatever Sean McVay does. And typically they're always like a cycle or two behind Sean McVay.
Yeah.
Last year, Devontae Adams got banged up. He had the hamstring injury for half the season. So rather than putting out receivers like Tutu Atwell and some of the other I'm trying to be nice, bad receivers that the Rams had, they opted to play more tight ends, and they were really successful. Now, they had Puka Nacua and they had Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, right? So they still had those three, and you can run your offense, but they were throwing the ball out of 12 and 13 personnel. That's 2 tight ends and 3 tight ends on the field, and they were pretty successful. And I think you see the rest of these GMs look at that situation on top of the Bears, Tommy, where the Bears drafted Colston Loveland at pick 10 last year. They also had Cole Kmet, and you saw what Ben Johnson was able to do with that Bears team. And now everybody's trying to be the Rams of the Bears.
I think that's a really good theory, because why would you not want to replicate Sean McVay, best coach in the business? It's kind of odd, though, because when you look at the Rams, it's like they don't have any superstar tight ends or anything that way, and yet they just have a bunch of them. They play a bunch of them. It's the receivers that soak up all of the production in the passing game still. So what I would ask you then, what is the purpose of playing so many tight ends if they're not necessarily going to be consistently involved in the passing game?
I think for the really good offensive minds, it's just to get different defensive looks, right? Because if you have, let's say it's a 13 personnel, and that is 1 wide receiver, 3 tight ends, and 1 running backs. A lot of times you're having to either go with a base defense with 3 linebackers on the field, or a big nickel with 3 safeties on the field, or however you decide to match up against it. And for an offensive minded coach like Sean McVay, that's awesome. Like less defensive backs on the field. That's a lot easier to design a passing game. I can move my number 1 receiver around to get advantageous situations. I think that's part of it. And all the numbers show throwing out of 12 and 13 personnel is incredibly valuable. And I think a lot of times people look at, having these tight ends on the field and you think, okay, we just want to become a better run team. Let's put 3 tight ends on the field, and that's how we're going to become a power running game. A lot of times that doesn't work because your second and third tight ends aren't generally great blockers, and usually putting that extra linebacker or extra safety on the field kind of negates that. I really think it's because of what you can do as a pass catcher. So if you've got guys like Tyler Higbee who can be, assets as receivers, that's how you get the most value out of these sets. But one of the things, Tommy, I'm fascinated by is in the NFL draft this year, we saw, I'm looking at the numbers now, 12 tight ends, I believe, go
Yeah.
in the first 95 picks, including some guys that we didn't think were going to be drafted inside the top 100, but you've got guys like Max Clare going to the Rams. Sam Roosh, who was at Stanford, he was an early third round pick from the Bears, who already have two really good tight ends. You see the Saints grab Oscar Delp. You see the Patriots grab Eli Raridon, who already have Hunter Henry. I just think these guys, because they can do so much, they can help out on special teams. Teams are putting more value on that position.
Yeah, it seems like no team can get enough tight ends right now. You look around the league, there are multiple teams with several high-paying tight ends. The Steelers just became the latest with Darnell Washington getting $10.5 million per year. That's on top of Pat Fryermuth getting $12.1 million a year. And you're looking at some of these teams investing $20+ million at the tight end position. The Vikings are one of those teams, TJ Hawkinson, and their Y tight end, their blocking tight end, Josh Oliver. You mentioned Charlie Kohler going to the Chargers. Like, it does feel like it's a dramatic shift from what we saw in the past decade of football, where it was like you had your Jimmy Graham and you didn't care what else was on your team. You had your Jason Witten and you didn't really care about the rest of the group. Now it feels like there's a much more even split, even when it comes to playing time and snap distribution among the top tight ends. And it's almost, Marcus, in a way, it kind of feels like the new running back position where it's kind of tight end by committee. And unless you have a really good one at Pro Bowl, all pro level tight end, then you're kind of just throwing guys out there that are going to get the most out of them playing multiple positions.
Yeah, and there's one other team that we should mention here. And I apologize for not mentioning them earlier, and that's the Buffalo Bills. Dalton Kincaid was the number 2 ranked tight end in the NFL last year by PFF. Now, he missed a lot of time, and that meant that Jackson Haas, who was a 5th round rookie from Georgia Tech, had to play a lot of snaps. And Jackson Haas actually finished as the 4th ranked tight end in the NFL. He played over 500 snaps. They also had Dawson Knox. So the Bills were another team, I think, because they were so depleted at receiver. Khalil Shakir got banged up early in the year. Keon Coleman was effectively benched for half the year. They just felt like the tight ends on their rosters were better players. I don't think it was because they felt like they found this grand new idea that's suddenly going to open up their offense. I think a lot of times these offensive coaches were just figuring like, hey, Jackson Haas is a better blocker than my third receiver. Let's put him on the field and try to figure it out.
Yeah, and that might be the best example of all, especially when you consider that Kincaid was a first-round pick. They are willing to take him off the field and play him in essentially a part-time role because of Jackson Haas and because of Dawson Knox and the trio that they have going on for them in Buffalo. Let's talk about the run game, because we talked about the tight end impact in that regard. I mean, could we see more teams rely even more heavily on the run game as we move forward? And I got to say, like, a few years back, we're talking like 3-4 years ago now, like Patrick Mahomes throwing for 50 touchdown type of seasons. I was wondering back then, I'm like, why would we ever see the NFL shift back the other way? I mean, offense is so high powered. In the last few years, I think that's gone down a little bit with the quick passing game, getting the ball out fast. Are we going to see a resurgence in the run game in the NFL?
I think we've seen it a little bit over the last couple of years. Now, I don't think it's necessarily been one single running back that has done it. I still think committees are the big, the way to do that. And I also think it depends on the team. Like, let me ask you this: do you know who led the NFL in rushing yards last year? Just give me a guess.
Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson was 4th. It was actually James Cook, and we don't think
That's
of
right.
James.
Yeah,
Cook,
it was Cook.
yeah, we don't think of James Cook as like this perennial all-pro running back, right? We think of James Cook as kind of like the sidekick to Josh Allen. They give him the ball whenever Josh Allen doesn't want to do something with it. I think you're going to see more of that, and maybe those guys will become more efficient, right? And again, the Bills are one of these teams that used more tight ends, but I do think you're going to see teams try to be more balanced, not because it's more effective that way, but also just it takes some of the wear and tear off your quarterback. And, but we obviously have a 17-game season. I think we're eventually going to get to an 18-game season. You just don't want your quarterback to be exposed to so many hits. I think that's where the run game is going to come back into the focal point for these offenses.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I mean, we've kind of had this running motto, philosophy, if you will, that running games matter and not necessarily running backs do. Don't get me wrong. There's a few guys who at their peak really hard to match their production by committee. Like Christian McCaffrey, what he
Yeah.
can do and the receiving game and the running game. And obviously Saquon Barkley, the season he had 2 years ago, like those guys matter. But in general, it's the running games that matter, not the running back. I do think the running game matters. I don't think that ever went away. It was
No.
more of the workhorse running backs kind of going by the wayside. And I think that we're still seeing that. I mean, we're look around, most teams around the league don't have just one true workhorse. It's getting like 85, 90% of the team's touches. And I think that's unwise. You're just going to wear them down, especially as the NFL season continues to get longer.
And I think teams are just being smarter about how they run the ball. Like it wasn't that uncommon 10 years ago to just see everybody, hey, it's 2nd and 10, run the ball, get yourself into 3rd and
Yeah.
manageable, right? That's not really the common thinking anymore. It's your goal shouldn't be to get to 3rd manageable. The goal should be to get a 1st down
Yeah.
on basically
Successful
every play.
rate. Yeah.
Right. So you're seeing teams be smarter about how to run the ball, when to run the ball, try to get formations on the field that can help you. So like if you're going to run the ball, try to run it out of 3 receiver sets. That way you only have 5 or 6 guys in the box, right? Throw the ball at a 3 tight end set. So that way you only have so many guys, in coverage. I think offensive coordinators and play callers in general have just gotten a lot smarter. And I think you're starting to see some of those, I like to call them dinosaurs, get phased out of the league a little bit. And I think that's why you're seeing the efficiency for these running backs all go way, way up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it only makes sense to lessen the workload, get guys fresh at the position, and I think that it's obviously safe to say we're never going to see those Emmitt Smiths again, those guys who can carry the load year after year after year and not wear down like that. It's just wise to distribute those touches. You are tuned into Stacking the Box, where NFL fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up fansided.com, powered by the passionate fans at Fansided. All right, Marcus, let's talk about the defense here and how will the things that we just talked about, the surgence of the tight end position, more 12 and 13 personnel, the running game, how will defenses now match up against us? What are they going to do to counteract those things?
Well, we started to see a little bit of it last year with Seattle, and really Baltimore did this with Kyle Hamilton as well. If you have a safety that can play in the slot, it just gives you more versatility. Now you can have 3 safeties in the field and you're still able to stop the run. And if you got a safety that can really cover, okay, now you put yourself into an advantageous situation. The problem is there's only a handful of those guys in the league. And this is what makes that position, I think, wouldn't be surprised if we see it become more valuable over the next couple of years. Kyle Hamilton can do it. Jalen Petrie in Houston can do it a little bit. Nicky Manwari with the Seahawks is the example that I mentioned at the top. Derwin James with the Chargers. If you have one of these safeties that can play in the slot, that can stop the run, that can rush the passer, that can cover a little bit, I do think that's the trend. And you're starting to hear from more and more defensive coordinators around the league, whether it's like a Vic Fangio or Christian Parker or Vance Joseph. The number one goal for their slot defender has got to be able to tackle. Like they can live with some of the coverage busts if you've got a guy that can make plays in the run game. And that time, kind of for us growing up, it was always these really small, undersized slot corners that were really good
Yeah.
in coverage. And you gave up a little bit in terms of the tackling. I think that's changing.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it really has. I mean, it used to be your boundary corners are big, your slot corner is small and shifty. And now what are they calling it these days? The star role, where you can play some safety, you can play box, you can play in the slot, obviously, you can cover, you've got size, length, and closing speed and tackling ability. Is why a guy like Devin Witherspoon is so successful in today's NFL. Like speaking and like, what is the model for this is the guy that I want to build my defense around, this star role? Like, who is that guy that's like prototype for that position right now?
I mean, Kyle Hamilton's the number one, but that's so hard to find guys like Kyle Hamilton. Again, Nicky Manwari is a really good one. I'll give you one from this year's draft. Caleb Downs is really the perfect type of guy for this role, right? He's 6 foot. He's 195 pounds. He can play free safety. He can play in the box. He can play a slot. And I think if you stick him at one position, you're probably not getting the most value, but his ability to play multiple spots and kind of line up wherever you need to based on the offense, that's what makes these guys so valuable. And I think that's why someone like Dylan Thieneman went in round 1, because he can do a lot of the same things. I do think you're going to see more and more of these players come out over the next 5 or so years. It's just really, really hard to find them.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning too that a lot of the best receivers in today's game, a lot of the quick passing game is going to the slot. And so to have a guy that can cover there, at least match some of that, play some inside leverage, and obviously some of these good corners they will follow you, and in the best in the league can go outside, inside, and have that flexibility. But I do think it's a really important role that's certainly gaining steam in the NFL right now. Let's talk about playing more safeties from the slot position, Marcus. And will this be something that we continue to see an uptick in this trend?
I would think so. I think because of how successful Nicky Manwari and Kyle Hamilton and Jalen Petrie have been in that role, I do think you'll see more of it. Now, not every safety is going to be able to handle that because you still have to be able to cover at an adequate level. And that's generally the knock for safeties. The reason why they're playing safety and not corner is because they
Yeah.
can't cover as well. That corner position pays basically double
Mhm.
as to what safeties do. But yeah, I do expect that trend to continue at least for the next couple of years.
I think it's going to be interesting to see if there are other teams who try to follow suit. It's a copycat league. We talked about teams trying to replicate what Sean McVay is doing on offense, and why not replicate what Mike McDonald is doing on
Mhm.
defense? Like it just what works is what other teams are going to notice as well. And I think that this is one of those things. And so, do you see any up and coming players at the position? The guys, I mean, Nick Emenwari is obviously one of them, and we saw the flashes during his rookie season. Are there any others out there that you think could be primed for this role?
By the way, I think it's really funny that Mike McDonald is the one that had Kyle Hamilton playing in that role in Baltimore, and now he's
Yeah.
got Nicky Manwari doing it
Yeah. I don't think
in
that's a
Seattle.
coincidence either. He
No,
wanted one of those guys for his defenses for sure.
I think that the top guy that I would keep an eye on is Evan Williams for the Green Bay Packers, who was really, really good last year. I thought he was one of the best run defending safeties. And the
Mm.
reason why he was so good is a lot of times they would blitz him right off the edge. I think we're going to talk about the Packers here in a little bit, but Evan Williams is the guy. If the Packers are going to get back to being a legit Super Bowl contender, he's the guy in their secondary that I think could take that step and really become a force this year.
All right, yeah, something to keep an eye on. Does your team have one of these guys, that slot
Probably not.
safety defender? Probably not. There's only a few of them in the league right now, and I think that we're getting away from that. We're getting further away from the Mike Hiltons of the world, just
Mhm.
the undersized 5'9" slot corners. We want these big guys that can cover, hit, run, tackle, chase, and do it all. We'll see where this ends up leading us. From the highs, the heartbreaks, every headline. This is Stacking the Box, your source for NFL talk, powered by Fansided and the voices at fansided.com. So let's talk about this, Marcus. Is it better to build a deep pass rush unit or to have one superstar? So we're shifting gears here from the safety talk, talking about pass rush. We've seen, for example, the Cleveland Browns and Myles Garrett. You had one superstar, always an adequate player across from him, and it was remarkable. Now, Garrett's one of one, so this is probably not a fair comparison to start with. But just based on what we've seen in recent years, and again, this is NFL trends. Are you buying these trends right now? Is it better to have a deep, full rotational unit like the Seattle Seahawks, for example, or to have a superstar edge rusher and then kind of just throw whoever next to them who's probably going to be efficient anyway, just because they're not drawing the attention?
I don't know. I wish I had a better answer, but this is something that I've been thinking about a lot over the last couple of weeks. And really, Brian Schottenheimer of the Dallas Cowboys brought this up that, he said all the best defenses in the league have multiple pass rushers rather than just one superstar one. And I think that's kind of cope for just not having Micah Parsons. But
Yeah.
also, I kind of understand it. And again, the Seahawks are the perfect example of it last year. They had some really good players, including Boy Mafi, Derek Hall, DeMarcus Lawrence. But I don't think you would call any of those guys top 15 edge rushers.
Yeah, I
Like I'm,
wouldn't
I'm
say
being
so.
conservative here. Like
Mhm.
there's a good chance that none of those guys are even top 20 edge rushers. And I look at someone like, or a team like Denver. Nick Benito is a really, really good player, but I don't know if Nick Benito is considered a superstar pass rusher or anything like
Yeah.
that. But they had just a bunch of guys that they could put in and they could all do different jobs and they could fill different roles. compared to like Green Bay last year that had Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary. But once Micah Parsons went down, the defense completely fell apart. They didn't win a single game after Micah got hurt in that Denver game. Cleveland, the same thing. Cleveland they have Myles Garrett, who is the best pass rusher I've seen over the last 20 years. And there were still games where they would give up 30 points because they could triple team Myles Garrett and take him out of the equation. I think you always want to have those superstars, but if you don't build out a good roster behind them, I don't know how much of it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good conversation because I think it could go either way. In fact, can I give you the Pittsburgh Steelers example of this here? Because we've seen it both ways just over the last 5 or 6 years. Younger TJ Watt from 2018 to 2021, it was superstar, not much else going with him. You had a kind of a so-so Bud Dupree. You had a really young Alex Highsmith who hasn't broke out yet. It was drafted in 2020. And in recent years, these last 2 years, TJ Watt is not that superstar anymore, but Alex Highsmith is playing his best football. Nick Herbig is broken out. And it's really, even for me, like, it's hard to say if one is better than the other. I would almost lean towards having the superstar that can draw a lot of attention and make the assignment easier for other players on the defense. But so much depends on that player. So much depends on their health and whether or not they are being able to overcome their assignment. And so I think what's more consistent is just having the better and deeper group overall.
Yeah, and again, being a Cowboy fan, I saw this play out where the Cowboys had some really good defenses in 22, 23. They get to a playoff game against the Packers, and the Packers are just dedicated to putting 2 guys on Micah Parsons wherever he goes. And it just really completely nullified the pass rush of Dallas. They had guys like DeMarcus Lawrence and Dante Fowler, who are good players, but not guys that can consistently win one-on-one. And that really torpedoed their season. They gave up 49 points in that game. I think if you can build a unit that has 4 or 5 guys that are all about the same caliber, that you feel good in any situation, that's ideal. It's also really hard to do that, just like it's hard to find a superstar pass rusher. There's just not many of those guys out there. And that's why I think like what the Chargers did last year with Jesse Minter, they have a 34-year-old Khalil Mack. They had Bud Dupree. They had Odafe Owe for half the season. Again, nobody that would be ranked as a top 12 pass rusher. And yet that was arguably the best defense in the league. So it really depends on who's calling your defense. It's tough.
I feel like I got a couple follow-up questions here, Marcus. And the first thing I would ask is, what is the right number in this edge rotation? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? And I think if you go any further than that, I don't know if there's many teams that keep 6 edge rushers out there, but you want to have your best guys on the field, right? But not at the cost. You want them to be fresh. And so where's the balance of keeping your most talented players fresh on the field, not digging too deep into your lineup where you're going to get less production, less efficiency?
Yeah, I think you want to have three guys that you feel really good about. Typically, one guy is going to be better than the other 2. And that guy you want to get, I think, like around 700 to 800 snaps, and then kind of split up the snaps between the other 2, because the goal here is to be good in the playoffs, right? If you've got one guy, and this is the situation like the Raiders have run into the last couple of years, they've got Max Crosby, an all-pro caliber player who's playing 1,000 snaps each season. But by the time we get to December and January, he's just gassed, right? And you don't have anybody that can take any of the pressure off of him. I think 3 is the right number. 4 would be great, but it's also really hard to find 4 quality edge rushers in today's NFL.
And one more question for you here, Marcus. Pass defense, pass rush. They go hand in hand. They work together. Cowboys fan, you know that better than anybody. The pressure Micah got, direct impact on the cornerback production and how well they were able to perform there. What's more important in today's NFL right here and right now? Is it having a deep, well-rounded pass defense that can aid your pass rush and allow them the time to get there? Or is it getting really quick pressure and not investing quite as much in your back end of your defense?
I still think it's the pressure up front, and I think Houston's the best example of this. Now, well,
Yeah.
maybe not because they also have really good
They have
players in the
talent there
secondary.
as well.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
but
just when you can get pressure with your front four and not have to blitz, you can do so many creative things on the back end. Whereas if you've got great coverage, but you have to send pressure to get the blitz, this is the problem that Minnesota has run into the last couple of years. They've got the talent in the secondary, they haven't had it up front, so they have to blitz. It just leaves you more exposed to giving up big plays. I would rather have the consistent pressure up front.
I agree. I think that that's still where I would lean, though. I think it is trending a little bit more towards the pass defense. We will see what happens in 2026. All right. This is Stacking the Box. It premieres every Tuesday evening. Be sure to check it out. You can follow Marcus on X at Marcus_Mosher. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Stacking the Box podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube. You can follow my written content on stillcurtain.com. Marcus's written content on the Fansided NFL Network. Be sure to check out fansided.com for all your daily sports news and opinions. And thanks again for listening to Stacking the Box.